Welcome to the second class in the Technology and Future Medicine course for fall 2012. So now I'm going to launch into my talk for today, which is the technological singularity explained and promoted. So you've seen this slide before that describes what the singularity is. It's that point in time where machines are smarter than human beings and control the agenda of the world. And we can then only take part in what's going on if we in some way cooperate or merge or become one with the machine activities. And those super sentient machines can then very rapidly self-improve and become much more intelligent, much more quickly than human beings ever could. So they begin being approximately equal maybe to the intellect of one human being and then of all human beings, and then finally they would be much smarter than all aggregate human beings. And from that point onwards, technological advancement is explosive under the control of the machines and cannot be accurately predicted. So using the analogy with the black hole and event horizon of physics, then we call this a singularity. So you may remember the croquet game in Alice in Wonderland. And you remember that the surprising thing about it was much more organic than expected. Everything was alive and moving. And so the mallet was a flamingo, and the ball was a hedgehog, and there was no certainty about it. Everything was biological and moving around and unpredictable. We face a world that's exactly the opposite of that. So if that world was more organic, more biological than expected, we face a world that's much less organic, much less biological than expected, and a world that may not need us at all, that could develop without us. And that's part of what we're talking about with the technological singularity. So I'm just going to briefly give you some structure behind this idea of the singularity and the theories about it. There are three main schools of belief about it. One is the accelerating change school that has to do with Moore's law and exponential change, and everything then comes from that increasingly rapid speed of technological development. The other is the event horizon, the uncertainty part, the idea that something becomes completely unknowable, unpredictable. And the third school of belief has to do with intelligence explosion. And Marcus Hutter has written an essay, Can Intelligence Explode? And that's on the reading list. And then within those schools of belief, there are four main paths by which one could achieve the singularity. One is you could create an AI that exceeds human intelligence. You could build a human-computer interface that allows humans to go beyond their innate intelligence to a significant extent. So this would be the cybernetic singularity. You could find ways to do this completely in biology. This is probably the least likely path. So completely in biology, then, you would improve upon the natural human intellect. And the fourth path is sort of where the internet wakes up. You build a large computer network in which beyond human intelligence emerges. So those are the four paths to the technological singularity. So all of these different variations in belief and paths and the way you think this might happen, slow takeoff, fast takeoff, so on, these are all reflected in the courses at Singularity University. So the experience that I and others have had, for instance, Shauna Pandya, who will be talking to you later, the experience we had there is a kind of general one that teaches us about all these various ways in which you might conceive of the technological singularity, and it's an experience that grows on one and that expands with time. Now, every now and then, you will, maybe at a late night party, encounter somebody who's mad at Ray Kurzweil. And they want to tell you that they're really upset with Ray Kurzweil because Ray Kurzweil has this strong, aberrant belief in this or that. And they're going to tell you how Ray Kurzweil is all wrong. And so on. And I'm here to tell you that argument doesn't work because he is amazingly broad and amazingly accessible. So if you're really upset with one of the concepts here, you can write to him and he will write back. He's not a completely inaccessible person. And in his reply to you, he'll probably, agree with part of what you posit, and he'll bring up a number of things you hadn't thought about, and you will learn a great deal from that. So, looking at you and Ray Kurzweil, who is the narrow one? It is unlikely that you would find the evidence that he is really the narrow one. Now, his 1999 book received a lot of criticism back then. So he spent 6 years writing a second book that is basically his reply to all the critiques of the first book. So if you think somebody at a late night party can just spend a few minutes thinking up a clever retort to him or a clever rejoinder that will just wipe him out intellectually, that's unlikely to happen because he's been spending years now crafting his arguments and thoughts about these subjects. So, of course, the technological singularity, that idea didn't begin with Ray Kurzweil. Where did it begin? Well, as far as we know, it began in 1847 with a somewhat obscure person, R. Thornton, who was the editor of a periodical called the Expounder of Primitive Christianity. And he was writing about the recent invention of the four-function mechanical calculator that he thought was going to be something very dire in the history of humanity. And he said, "Such machines by which the scholar may, turning a crank, grind out the solution of a problem without the fatigue of mental application, would, by its introduction into schools, do incalculable injury. But who knows that such machines, when brought to greater perfection, may not think of a plan to remedy all their own defects and then grind out ideas beyond the ken of mortal mind." So that's pretty remarkable. And in 1847, he has the idea of self-improvement, of machines being better than we are. Pretty cool. And the next person to write about this was Samuel Butler. And this was 4 years after Darwin wrote The Origin of the Species, which was 1859. So in 1863, Samuel Butler published a letter entitled Darwin Among the Machines, talking about human evolution versus machine evolution. And that letter compared human evolution to machine evolution, prophesizing half in jest that the machines would eventually replace man in the supremacy of the earth. In the course of the ages, we shall find ourselves the inferior race. And the letter raises many of the themes which are now being debated by proponents of the technological singularity. And then 9 years later, in novel Erewhon, which you will see is nowhere backwards. So in this novel, he wrote the following: "There is no security against the ultimate development of mechanical consciousness in the fact that machines possessing little consciousness now, a mollusk has not much consciousness, reflect upon the extraordinary advance which machines have brought during the last few hundred years, and note how slowly the animal and vegetable kingdoms are advancing. The more highly organized machines are creatures not so much of yesterday as of the last 5 minutes, so to speak, in comparison with past time." So once again, very insightful and written a long time ago. And then these would be the authors that you're probably more familiar with. I.J. Good was regarded as, by most people, as the first person to really write in detail about the idea of the technological singularity, and Werner Vinge, who is in many people's minds the origin of the idea. And then Ray Kurzweil has been an important popularizer of this. And the important meetings here are the Singularity Summit, sponsored by the Singularity Institute, and then Singularity University, and the philosophers David Chalmers, who's well known, and Marcus Hutter, who at the moment is less well known and younger. I just wanted to mention a little bit about Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near. You know that there's no required reading for this course. At one time, I was toying with the idea of making that book a requirement, but let me tell you what happens. When people start reading that book, many people do not succeed in getting beyond the first 50, 60 pages. It's a fairly dense book. You would benefit a lot from reading it all. You'll meet some people who read it quickly and benefited a great deal from that. I think Jonathan White says in his first lecture that he read it in a few days and it was kind of life-changing. So it's not a requirement, but it's something you might try, and if you try and fail, you won't be the first person who tried and failed. If the book just doesn't hold your interests, if you find yourself going on to something else, that's just fine. But a lot of the people with strong ideas about this area fall into that category. They haven't read most of the book. They may not have read any of the book. And so it does give you more credence. It is the book in this area at the moment. And as you know, Ray Kurzweil has a book that's coming out in about 6 weeks on how the mind works and how to build one. So that will also be a very interesting book. So it's a decision you need to make yourself, what the relationship between that book and you is. But it can be a bit of a challenge. So Moore's Law, we went over this before. I should say now that I'm now using a selection of Marcus Hutter's slides. This is about a third of the middle section of the talk that he will be giving in 5 weeks' time. So it's about a third of those slides. It tends to sort of hit the high points. So in Moore's Law, which looks at the exponential increase in price performance of computing, you can calculate when it is that computers will be equal in intellect to one human being and to all human beings. So 2045 is approximately the date when computers should be equal to the intellect of all aggregate human beings on Earth. And then, of course, it goes on beyond that, but that would be the singularity. So superintelligence by Moore's law, the price performance of computing doubles every 1.5 years. That's now been valid for about 50 years. And as we talked about last time, it may not completely hold within medicine because there are various special inhibitory factors within medicine, but it holds for the world in general. So in 20 or 30 years, the raw computing power of a single computer will become approximately equal to the human brain. And you can imagine that software will keep up with hardware. So we'll have human-level AI, presumably, in 20 to 30 years. This is another way to look at it, is the rate of doubling. So in the hunter-gatherer Stone Age, the rate of doubling was about every 250,000 years. Then in the agricultural economy, it was every 900 years. In the Industrial Revolution, it was every 15 years. In our present computer-dominated society, it's 1.5 years. And you can imagine with superhuman intelligences in charge, it would be monthly or faster than that. And these are the various epochs of evolution. And so we are in 4 and 5 here, technology and the merger of technology and human intelligence. And epoch 6 is the universe wakes up, where the whole world, the whole universe becomes sentient, computerized. So Marcus has asked, is the singularity negotiable? You know, is this something we can say, no, we don't want it? It's interesting. I was listening to Cory Doctorow talk about his latest science fiction book. And in that, the singularity actually comes knocking on the door of a character. So it's a question. And actually in the book, there's an attempt not to answer the door, but it's mandatory. When the singularity comes knocking, you have to answer the door. So that's a question. Do we have a choice about this? Is it something that perhaps we're already close enough that there is no choice? Maybe the singularity is already now unavoidable. Politically, it would be very difficult, but not impossible, to resist technology or market forces. Be similarly difficult to prevent AGI research, acute artificial general intelligence research, and even harder to prevent the development of faster computers. So whether we're at, before, or beyond the point of no return is also philosophically intricate, as it depends so much on free will. We talked about free will last time, and I don't know how much you believe in free will or not. Certainly, the whole purpose of this course makes more sense if there is free will, because if there isn't, my idea that you can help shape the future is ridiculous, because if there's no free will, no one can shape the future, and we're just pretending. But as I've said, pretending that there's There either is free will, or in the absence of it, we pretend there is. One way or the other, it exists in some sense. So you can make then analogies here with global warming politics and the inevitability of global warming. You can think of a spaceship near the edge of a black hole. It might in principle escape in theory, but it would lack the propulsion. There are lots of other ways you can think about this. Probably the singularity is not something we can stop. Probably we're powerless here. There's some interesting information analogies. The inside process resembles a radiating black hole observed from the outside. The maximally compressed information is indistinguishable from random noise. Think if you had a library containing all information in the world. Such a library would presumably be worthless because you could not sort, you could not search if you were so overloaded with the information there. So it's rather amusing to think that a library with all possible information and a library with no information are of equal value. They would both be absolutely worthless. So you need some sorting, some selection, some searching. Maybe a society of increasing intelligence will become increasingly indistinguishable from noise when viewed from the outside. And probably, either way you look at it, whether you're inside the singularity as it's occurring or outside, you can't really witness what's going on. If you're inside, you won't notice anything, presumably because your intellectual processes will speed up at the same rate as everything else. And if you're outside, it will just seem like a blizzard of white noise. How is it going to work exactly? Will it be mainly internal to us, going on inside us? Will it be outside? I guess we don't know that. Expansion, inward to outward, usually follows the way of least resistance. Outward explosion of information and computerization would stop when all accessible, convertible matter had been used up. And historically, mankind has always been outward exploring, just in recent times, we've been inwardly exploring. For instance, through miniaturization and virtual reality. So a strict intelligence singularity would probably not be experienced as really something by either of the people on the inside or the outside. The singularity might seem more interesting for the outsiders than the insiders. On the other hand, the insiders actively live potential societal changes, while the outsiders only passively observe them. And we don't know which side we're going to be on, of course, at the moment. So what is intelligence? There have been numerous attempts to define this, and so Legg and Hutter provided a collection of 70 plus definitions and then came up with what seemed like the best one. If intelligence is not just speed of mental processes, then what is it? And what will superintelligent machines actually do? So if you look at it over time, evolution involved mutation, recombination, selection, increases intelligence if useful for survival and procreation. So animals with higher intelligence via some correlated practical cognitive capacity that increases the chance of survival and number of offspring. But in humans, it's different. In humans, intelligence is now positively correlated with power or economic success, but negatively with a number of children. And probably further evolution is not now biological, but sort of genetic evolution has largely been replaced by the evolution of ideas, mimetic evolution, the replication, variation, selection, and spreading of ideas causing cultural evolution. So what activities are intelligent? What constitutes evidence for intelligence? And does this give us a clue to what superintelligent machines or beings will do? Is it self-preservation, self-replication, spreading, colonizing the universe, creating better, faster, higher intelligences, learning as much as possible, understanding the universe, maximizing power over men and organizations, transformation of matter into computronium, maximum self-sufficiency, or the search for the meaning of life? And what about intelligence vis-a-vis rationality, reasoning toward a goal? More flexible notion, expected utility maximization, cumulative long-term reward maximization, but who provides the rewards? What will be the rewards for robots, the rewards for machines? Goal-oriented behavior now often appears to be at odds with long-term pleasure maximization. So it's not simple how we are rewarded and motivated now. Still, the evolved biological goals and desires to survive, procreate, and parent seem to dominate and are seldom disowned. So in evolving goals, initialization, who sets the goals for superintelligences and how? Anyway, ultimately we'll lose control. Even if we set those goals, after a while we will no longer control the goals and it will matter less what the original goals were. The artificial general intelligences themselves will build further artificial general intelligences if they're motivated to do so. This will gain its own dynamic. Some aspects of this might be independent goal structure. Assuming that the initial virtual world is a society of cooperating and competing agents, there'll be competition over limited computational resources. Those virtuals that have the goal to acquire them will naturally become more successful than the ones that don't. And the successful virtuals will spread in various ways and others perish. So the end result, maybe, soon their society will consist mainly of virtuals whose goal is to compete over resources. Hostility will only be limited if this is in the virtual's best interest. For instance, current society has replaced war mainly by economic competition. And since modern weaponry makes most wars a loss for both sides, while economic competition in most cases benefits at least the better. The goal is to survive and spread, but remember that bacteria do that. We don't regard them as being very intelligent. But there are more bacterial cells in your body by far than there are your own cells. And that way, the bacteria are quite numerically successful. You can think of alternative societies where some of these rules would be different. A society of enforced global collaboration with no hostile competition, but this would likely require a powerful single virtual world and giving up individual privacy and severely limiting individual freedom, sort of like an anthill or a beehive. It's not clear this would be necessarily desirable, but it is one way to do it. or it would require a societal setup can only produce conforming individuals. It might only be possible by severely limiting individuals' creativity, like a flock of sheep or a school of fish. Such well-regulated societies might be better viewed as a single organism or collective mind. Maybe the virtual world is inhabited from the outset by a single individual. Both virtual worlds could look different, more peaceful, or dystopian than the traditional ones created by evolution. Intelligence would have to be defined quite differently in such worlds. So another important aspect of intelligence is how flexible or adaptive an individual is. Deep Blue might be the best chess player on Earth, but it's unable to do anything else. On the contrary, higher animals and humans have a remarkably broad capacities, can perform well in a wide range of environments. So Marcus Hutter and his collaborator have come up with this idea that a formal intelligence measure is intelligence is the ability to achieve goals in a wide variety of environments. That definition implicitly captures most, if not all, traits of rational intelligence, has been rigorously formalized, and is the most comprehensive formal definition of intelligence thus far. Now, in the virtual world, it would be easy to copy things, and so suddenly the value of a mind, the value of an intelligence goes down because it's so easy to replicate and copy. Virtual lives could be simulated at different speeds, with speeders experiencing slower societal progress than laggards. Designed intelligences will fill economic niches. Our current society already relies on specialists with many years of training, so it's natural to go the next step to ease this process by designing our descendants. And how would this affect the value of life? Another consequence could be that life becomes less valuable. Our society values life, since life is a valuable commodity and expensive, laborious to replace, produce, raise. We value our own life, since evolution selects only organisms that value their life. Our human moral code mainly mimics this, with cultural differences and some excesses. If life becomes cheap, motivation to value it will decline. So cheap machines decrease value of physical labor. Some expert knowledge was replaced by handwritten documents and then printed books. Finally, electronic files. Each transition reduced the value of the same information. Digital computers made human computers obsolete. And in games, we value our own virtual life and that of our opponents less than real life, because games can be reset and one can be resurrected. So what would be the consequence of cheap life? Governments will stop paying my salary when they can get the same research output from a digital version of me essentially for free. And why not participate in a dangerous, fun activity if, in the worst case, I have to activate a backup copy of myself from yesterday, which just missed out this one anyway not so well going day? The belief in immortality can alter behavior drastically. So the value of virtual life, countless implications here: ethical, political, economical, medical, cultural, humanitarian, religious. It would have an impact on art, warfare. Much of our society is driven by the fact that we highly value human individual life. If virtual life is or becomes cheap, these drives will ultimately vanish and be replaced by other goals. If AIs can be easily created, the value of an individual, of an intelligent individual, will be much lower than the value of human life today. So it may be ethically acceptable to freeze, duplicate, slow down, modify, or even kill oneself or other AIs at will if there are abundant and or backups are available, just as we are used to doing with software. So laws preventing experimentation with intelligence for moral reasons may not emerge. With so little value assigned to an individual life, maybe it becomes a disposable. So that finally brings the question of whether there are universal values, and if there are, what are they? Are there any universal values or qualities we want to see or that should survive? And what do we mean by we? Who is we? All humans, or the dominant species, or government at the time the question is asked? Could this universal value be diversity itself, or friendly AI? Or could it be the long-term survival of at least one conscious species that appreciates its surrounding universe? Could that be the universal value? Well, right about now, I think these are somewhat depressing thoughts. So I want to raise your spirits a little bit and shift gears. And so those slides have been from Marcus Hutter, and these slides are from me. We had the idea that to engage the public on these subjects, we need something simple, appealing, that kind of grab them and get them thinking in a new direction. And maybe the way to do that is to create a new holiday, a holiday around the future, Future Day. And last year there was a Future Day on March 1st, and it was celebrated in 13 cities around the world, and this was one of them. And some of the people here took part in Future Day. They can tell you about it. Here's a picture of the beginning of Future Day. Here are the cities in which it was celebrated: Melbourne, Sydney, Hong Kong, Berkeley, Edmonton, Houston, Hawaii, Sao Paulo, Thanksgiving Point, Utah, Brussels, Paris, LA, Palo Alto, Washington, Carlton, Australia, Warsaw, Poland. It was an attempt to reach a greater number of people with these ideas. I spoke last time about the Big Bang Theory as maybe something to make us think about how many people we could reach. Reaches 16 million people in the US, 30 million worldwide. It had an episode about the technological singularity on October 1st, 2010. And here's a graphic from there. You can see there's the word singularity circled there on that timeline. And one of the other cool things was that Woz, the other founder of Apple Computers, had a guest appearance on that episode. Okay, but how are we going to get people interested in this? A holiday has to have pageantry. It has to have things you remember. It has to have ceremony. It has to have visuals. It has to have something that makes it distinct from everything else in your life. One thing that impressed me as I traveled is I became aware of the Holi festival in the Indian subcontinent, and there's nothing like it here. There are these bright colored pigments, and it's a very unifying, democratizing holiday there, in that people who are not in your same social strata that you would never interact with, the time of this holiday you do. And people are sprinkling these pigments on each other, and it's extremely colorful. In the beginning, the pigments all came from plants. They were non-toxic, but as you can imagine, it's a lot easier to get bright-colored pigments from toxic sources. So the real medical side to this, the side effects of this. And you can imagine that in your life you've never experienced anything like this, anything quite as colorful, anything that is socially like this. I have no idea whether this gives us one clue of how we might attract people to a new holiday. There is also this Crayola bomb poem. And that poem is the only poem on my Facebook page, and has always been the only poem on my Facebook page. So, perhaps we should devise a happiness weapon, a Crayola bomb, and every time a crisis developed, we would launch one. It would explode high up into the air, explode softly, send thousands, millions of little parachutes into the air, floating down to the earth, boxes of Crayolas, and we wouldn't go cheap either. Boxes of 64 with a sharpener built right in, with silver and gold and copper and magenta and peach and lime and amber and umber and all the rest. And the people would smile and get a funny look on their faces and cover the world with imagination. And if that doesn't do it for you, you may know that the Roomba artificial intelligence vacuum cleaner, if you do a time-lapse picture of it, it's also quite colorful. And what other colorful experiences can you bring into your life in some sort of festival setting? It's also the hot air balloon. So this also. Well, you couldn't just have visuals. You'd need poetry and song. There are probably 1,000 different songs you could postulate here. One might be the windmills of your mind, round like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, on an ever-spinning reel like a snowball down a mountain, or a carnival balloon like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon. Like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, and the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of this lecture. I would like you to help me conceptualize how we could capture the imagination of the public around these ideas, get more people thinking and talking about them. We need the mainstream public to regard the future technological singularity as facts, not fiction, and we need to promote organizing thinking about it and about the future in universities and beyond. I guess that's in part what this course is designed to do. I also want to acknowledge the references here. Marcus Hutter's essay, Can Intelligence Explode? So some of the slides here are from a PowerPoint that he gave at the Singularity Summit in Australia with the same title, Can Intelligence Explode? And he makes heavy reference to Chalmers' essay, The Singularity of Philosophical Analysis, and both of those are in the Journal of Consciousness Studies. So that's it for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I know it's sort of a mixed bag, part very serious and somewhat depressing to think of these future changes that diminish the value of human life. And perhaps the last part is a little bit uplifting and exciting, thinking of how we can engage people on these issues and help make things better. What are your thoughts? I'd be happy to entertain questions. We have 2 microphones, and surely somebody must have come on now. Yeah?
Okay. Oh, a little louder this time. So maybe you can clear something up for me. You had a slide where you talk about epochs of singularities.
Yes.
And at the same time, we're talking about the indistinguishability of future epochs. So what I am trying to understand is whether, say, an epoch 5 singularity would be able to understand that an epoch 6 singularity has occurred. Because from what we've said so far, those events are indistinguishable, or to the past epochs.
Yeah. Well, I guess the epoch 6 is where the whole universe wakes up. It's maximum expansion, I guess, of sentient explosion and computerization. It depends upon how one defines the singularity. Maybe with a pure definition, there is only one. So you're making an arbitrary distinction between things that would not really be distinguishable. Maybe epoch 6 is all beyond the singularity. It's amusing, in Cory Doctorow's new book, there's jury duty. So some human beings have to serve on a jury, and so the sentient machines send down ideas of things they could introduce into the world, technologies, but should they? And then this jury decides yes or no. So I don't think, we can keep pretending that we all agree on a structure for something that we have also agreed is completely unknowable and unpredictable, but probably we can't agree on a structure on something that's unknowable and unpredictable. So what are these different epochs? They're general concepts, right? Just like a lot of the things we talk about in this course are valuable to talk about. There are things that may occur. There are things it helps, conceptualization of the future to consider these possibilities. But since a lot of it is completely unknown, structural questions and questions of relationships are one thing to the other. We just can't answer those questions yet. One of the criticisms of previous courses by ourselves, I guess self-criticisms, is that probably the old guys did too much talking and the students didn't do quite enough. So those of you who are just haven't quite decided whether you're brave enough to ask a question or not, please do, because I think we would all. It doesn't have to be a fantastic question, It seems there are probably a lot of flaws in what I've just presented to you, things that are unclear, things that should be questioned. So please, could somebody ask me a question? Why not? What's the worst that could happen,
So, you were talking about the decrease in value of life, and
right.
I was just having a little bit of trouble following from the previous slides because it kind of seemed like it was talking about human life and that it's the value of intelligence is going down as more intelligence is being brought into the world. But it's not really clear whether human life would actually be devalued and that only artificial intelligence would be devalued.
Well, so by definition, these sentient machines would be in charge of what's going on in the world. They kind of set the agenda. I mean, you can imagine just one thing that people have postulated might happen is the world suddenly becomes green, you know, much greener than it is now, magically, you know, the world's green, chlorophyll everywhere. So, yeah, I think in those slides Marcus Hutter is talking about, in general, you know, intelligence being devalued because it's so easy to create it, but also human life because we are now not as smart as other intellects out there. So it's the main danger then is our own devaluing our own lives, right, and taking risks. You know, I think that it's not necessarily clear that there would be a danger from the outside. I was reading last night, somebody was saying that AI naturally might be friendly. Why not, you know? Doesn't it seem like it's more aberrant, more complicated for an AI to figure out how to be, you know, mean and unfriendly than to just be friendly? It's created by us at some point in the first place, so why wouldn't that be more natural? So we may not face a world where these sentient machines are trying to do us in, but they just may not care about us very much. I don't know if you have fish or frogs, but if you do, stand in front of the fish or frog tank and just try to think of you know, how much you care or you don't care about what they're thinking, you know, and what they're planning. And, you know, seems so stupid, right? I mean, they're mainly interested in food, and that seems to be, you know, reproduction food, that's it, you know. And so we presumably have much higher, you know, intellectual lives than those beings do. So will the sentient machines feel like that about us? And they, you know, we're maybe enjoyable to have around, but just not all that you know, interesting. So I guess that's my answer, but it's not clear exactly what would happen. What we talked about last time, which is being on permanent holiday, you know, it seems to me that's a real reality, and probably sooner than we think. I mean, that doesn't require a lot of, all that requires is that you're a human being, that society values keeping you around, but you don't have any skills that, you know, machines don't have. And you can imagine that in 10, 15 years, there might be a lot of people in that category. And is that a horror kind of scenario, being on permanent vacation? Is it utopia? Well, it depends on what it's like, you know. How good is the virtual reality? Does it contribute to other people's virtual reality? Is it interactive? Is it, you know, completely solipsistic, where it seems like you're the only person in the world, or is there a rich societal component to it? There are many other questions about that. But there are things like that that probably precede the technological singularity, and are things we could kind of debate. If you don't think that'll happen, then what do you think will happen? Somebody now who, you know, let's say is a high school dropout and has been working as a janitor, doing very well for most of their years, and the janitorial tasks do not involve anything, let's say in 15 years, that robots can't do better and, you know, cheaper, and they'll do it around the clock and so on. So what's going to happen there? What about normal human motivation? It's possible that the people in this room aren't quite normal in that way. For instance, if you want to change the world, if you want to be successful, both of those things are not normal. The normal human being is motivated by comfort and security, period. They may seem to be motivated by other things, but that's because those other things are associated with, you know, comfort and security. So could it be that the majority of people out there, when faced with this possibility of being on, you know, vacation their whole life, would say, yeah, you know, that's fine with me. And then when you look at Maslow's pyramids, you know, the top things there of self-actualization and that sort of thing, how many people are really going to be, you know, aspiring for those higher goals? It's a very interesting question.
Just something to add about being inside versus outside the singularity when it happens. I'm thinking about older generations, people who are not so interested in technology and what's going on. They're kind of outside the bubble with regards to Facebook, social media, the internet, and it's probably going to happen that more people will feel that way as technology increases more and more, that they're outside what's going on. It'll just be younger and younger people or more intelligent people that eventually become part of this generation where they're influencing what's happening with AI and what's exploding, whereas most of us will be on the perimeter going towards that vacation sort of under sort of situation.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be as tied to age as you might think, but I would, you know, agree with you that there are going, and a lot of it is tied to location. I mean, if you look at very poor countries, you know, Central Africa and so on, it's hard to see how the technological singularity, the sort of inside part, would take place if there are very few resources. If day-to-day life is in question, you know, if it's not clear how to get enough food and how to sort of keep things going in general, then the technology to be part of, you know, a rapidly increasing, you know, internet and all that everything is probably just not going to be there. So I think the inside and outside is partly regional and related to, you know, resources and how well off people are. Are there other questions? Yeah?
Just kind of referring to when you're talking about how technology has increased, you know, back in the Stone Age is like 290,000 years before it doubled and so on and so forth. Right. I guess my question revolves around, wasn't that due to people's influence? As far as, you know, they discovered the wheel, they discovered fire, and that's what doubled technology in a way, as now we're developing better microchips and that sort of thing. So in that sort of sense, can't like technology only advance to the point of human brains? Because at that point, it's kind of run out of, you know, its human influence resource, and it's only at par with where we are, you know?
Well, I think that actually feeds right into the next 4 lectures. I mean, the whole idea of machine learning, I mean, the old idea of, you know, expert systems, where you would find the human experts, you know, interview them, get the knowledge that those human experts had, put it all together in software and hardware. But now what's more common is to let the machine come up with its own solution that may not be understandable by a human being at all. You just give the machine a task, figure out the formula or the way in which you will do this, and the machine does that, creates a kind of black box which only the machine maybe understands. So in that sense, if you were right, if everything is dependent upon the human mind and human thought, then there's no threat from AI in the future at all, because AI will just be us, right? It'll be our ideas, our thoughts, our formulas put into a machine. But those AIs will be able to self-improve without us, just the same as now today, you know, machines are able to figure out relationships and predictions of things in a way that we cannot make sense of. You know, we can't then look inside the machine, find the formula that it's used, and then figure out how it was doing that. We can't. We're not able to do that. So machines are, in a sense, already beyond us. So you're right that in past eras, all the big changes were always due to discoveries and creativity of human beings. But one presumes that that won't always be the case in the future. That there will be breakthroughs that will not require us. And yeah, so, and if you believe that everything machines do is determined by human beings, just take any device and the smartest tech person that you know, take the cover off the device and start pointing to components. Say, what does this do? What does that do? And no matter how good this person is, they won't be able to tell you. Without the schematic diagram, they won't have a clue. And so it shows you how much apparent magic and, you know, mystery is already there. And this will just become more so. That's been true for a long time. Taking off the cover and pointing and asking, you know, the smartest tech person that you know what the things are and having them not know the answer, that's been the case for a long time. What is that? What does it do? And so in a larger sense, in the technology world in general, we don't know the answer to that question. A machine's doing something. You look at individual parts of the machine and say, well, what is that and how does it work? And so that's the reason why, you know, machines will be able to do things that will be beyond our ken, that we will not be able to understand. That will happen. If you look at the 3 days of Jeopardy playing by Watson in February 2011, you can readily get the feeling that mankind, human beings, have already lost out. At least in that game, we're no longer as good as machines are. So it wasn't just that Watson happened to beat the top two human contenders. It was apparent by the third day that Watson could have beat anyone, anytime. Similarly with playing chess and Deep Blue, you know that Jonathan Schaefer, the current dean of science, he solved checkers, and that's, a complete solution. So that software will always be able to master any human player playing checkers. These are just, individual examples, but the areas are getting broader, and so it won't be long before something important to you in your own life that I've always valued, that humans being able to do that, you'll find that a machine's able to do it better. So that will happen.
Just saying how you say that humans will just make machines to do jobs in the future. Wouldn't it also make more sense, just looking at human nature, that humans would want to upgrade themselves to still be able to do jobs at the level that the machines do it?
Yes, and so it's a matter of proportion. Like when the first machine implants come, there already are implants in a sense for Parkinsonism patients and so on. But so for the implants in our brains that will make us more intelligent when they begin, maybe the proportion is 50-50. Half of the thinking is now going on in that computer and half in our brain. But because the computer will be able to improve much more quickly, the proportion of mental process that the biological brain is doing will be less and less. And so you're right, we'll get a share of the action. We'll be in there amongst these sentient machines by having sentient machines in our head. But that won't be a solution for forever, because we'll rapidly get kind of diluted out. You can think the analogy is a single drop of water in Niagara Falls. You can imagine that eventually our biological brains, what they contribute to the overall mental process might be a very, very small fraction. And most of those things, first of all, longevity is going to increase. So you will live longer than you probably think that you will, and you'll be mentally active longer, healthy longer, and working longer. Whatever work you probably have 5 or 6 jobs in your life, and the last few of those will be jobs that don't even exist now. So these things are really quite relevant to you. We're not talking about a future that's beyond you. We're talking about something that will actually happen to you. You'll be able to think back, Solez was wrong, or Solez was right. Anyway, one way or the other, there will come a moment when some of these things we're talking about now actually happen. Yes?
I was wondering what types of machines were present back in the 1800s that inspired these philosophers to first think about the technological singularity. Because from what I see, it's just difficult to imagine that seeing a abacus, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Like seeing a abacus function will inspire you to think about how machines or how machines will one day be superior intellectually than humans.
Well, I think it was the loom. The loom, so it was a punch card programmable loom, right? So that started us thinking about punch cards for programs. So the punch card would control which color thread which went into which particular line in the fabric that was being woven by this loom. And these looms were very large. They took away people's livelihood. And so the Luddites, attacked them with giant hammers and all that sort of thing. So I think it was that probably more than, the abacus. These were bigger things. They were more impressive. Maybe their effect on society was more striking. So I think that probably, but of course that first quote is about the 4-function calculators. So simply a mechanical calculator like an adding machine, I guess, can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I remember when the first electronic calculators came out. My boss at the time, who was around 60, couldn't believe these things would actually work, and he kept testing it and waiting for it to make a mistake, but it never did. And so I guess that's the kind of experience that presumably led to that first quote. And thinking then, this is mental laziness. If you memorize the multiplication tables and now you don't need them anymore, well, that part of your schooling is just wasted, right? And I mean, what are you going to use that part of your brain for anymore, It's not the way we think about things today, but in a general way it is. As Jonathan White will tell you, he's written a recent paper about, physicians on the wards, when faced with a problem, they look it up on their phones. They, go to Google, just like you do. And so how does that work? Well, it actually works pretty well. And what does that mean? Does it mean that in medical school you don't need to learn anything? No, I guess being prepared, knowing the rest of what surrounds the answer, knowing the right question, all that requires training. But still, we're in a situation where young physicians today are very heavily using devices. So that's a long answer, but I think that's what stimulated those thoughts. So we have 1 minute. Because, all the other classes are bigger than us, so they outnumber us. So when the next class comes in, we have to get out of here. Please think about this idea of how to do the student presentations. Let me know if you're violently opposed to the idea of doing something social and out of class time to do that. Thank you very much for coming today, and we'll see you on Thursday. Okay, thanks.